3-decade-long career, Anil Swarup has straddled many roles. In his book, Not Just a Civil Servant, he's done some plain speaking about many issues he's seen at close quarters. Are bureaucrats resorting to speaking first and planning later? Has the Uday scheme lived up to the potential it promised? I spoke about these issues with the former bureaucrat a short while ago and started by asking him about the on-ground impact of the CAG report on coal. He believes that it had a devastating impact on decision-making. Listen in.
I became coal secretary after the so-called coal scam. Yeah. And there were officers who refused to commit themselves on the file, and rightly so, because they were apprehensive that once they commit on the file, at some point in time, they will be called to question. So what I say in my book is, yes, there were a number of wrongs that were done in terms of coal block allocation during the previous government. But the manner in which it was presented, the calculations that were done, the grandstanding that was done, created an environment where officers started thinking twice before committing themselves on the file. So you have officers like Mr. Harish Gupta, Krofa, all these officers have absolutely spotless reputation, and they are in serious trouble because of the grandstanding. It's not,
So was it politicized?
It was ultimately, once the report came, then it became political. I would not say it was political before the report. The report gave the fodder for it to become political. That's why I say, see, I have no control over politicians, but I have control over myself. As a civil servant, it is my job to do my job, nothing beyond it. Grandstanding actually reflects doing something beyond my job. I distinctly remember the Deputy CAG flashing that report in a press conference. That is unbecoming of a civil servant. Our job is to present a report. Report goes to the parliament. If there is a press conference, answer them. Don't grandstand. Don't go and announce that there is a scam. If there is a scam, let me discover. My contention is that if there is a wrong, nail that wrong. There was a wrong, nail that. But don't come up with generic figures like there is a notional loss of so many crores. And what is the calculation? You look at an average cost of mining. The mining varies from 400 rupees to 4,000 rupees. Yeah. How can you average it at 590? Look at the comparisons that are made. So someone probably didn't have the time or didn't want to go into the details of it and came up with conclusions with devastating consequences on governance apart from anything else.
What has been the most devastating consequence of the CAG report on coal that the country is faced with today, to your mind? Decision-making
impacted. There are certain files, when we did the coal block auction, I had to commit. I was the first person to commit on the file as secretary. That normally doesn't happen. The file comes from joint secretary or director, where they come up with this recommendation that this should be done. There was, in number of files, there was no recommendation on the file. I examined it and committed for the first time. I did it. This was because they were not prepared to commit themselves on the file. See, the problem is, now I'm glad that the current government has changed the law. Earlier, the law was 13(1)(d) of the Prevention of Corruption Act.
Yeah.
You know, you could be held liable irrespective of the fact whether there was any malafide or not. And it was crazy. And civil servants are being hounded for that. So you come up with an environment where people feel all wrong has been done without going into the details of it, and everyone gets sucked into it, and thereafter decision-making gets impacted. That's what happened.
You know, one, of course, the devastating impact to your mind, of what happened with the CAG report on coal, and you believe that the economy is still facing the brunt of that and the consequences of that. But this grandstanding that you spoke of, in fact, the chapter in your book is called Yearning to be Famous. How much of this is a problem that you see today in the bureaucracy?
You know, I have somehow come to see that some of us, not all, some of us have started road showing things. There is no harm in going for a road show. My contention is, first the groundwork needs to be done. You can't become a event management chief, managing one event, then the other event, without looking into the ground reality, what's going on. And that's where some of the problems emerge. People question it subsequently, because ultimately your success or failure will be determined by what you actually do on the ground, not what you're talking about. So I have always believed, you talk, but after the walk. You don't start talking without walking or start talking before walking. I mean, in a number of cases, I find civil servants, after having done some solid work, they talk to the media and tell them what good work has been done. That needs to be done. But you can't be announcing like a politician. You can't be making announcements without doing your groundwork. My personal view is, civil servants should first walk and then talk. They have to talk. I'm not against their talking. but not so much talking as they do.
What is your apprehension about the manner in which the Uday program was taken forward and how it's going to finally end up?
I'm a bit surprised that we had a model in the country which worked so beautifully, the Gujarat model in the power sector. You know, Uday scheme is based on what happened in Gujarat. And the hope was that this model would be replicated elsewhere. I'm not very sure whether the scheme was implemented with the intensity which it ought to. It ultimately got reduced to only financial management. That is, transferring the debt of the discount to the state governments. Beyond it, feeder separation, AT&T losses.
So the actual reform hasn't happened?
It has happened, but not to the level it should. I mean, the data I was looking at, around 13 discoms are doing worse than what they were doing before Uday came into being. So there is something wrong somewhere. Now, had it just been a theoretical model, one could have understood that it was difficult to implement. You had a working model, and I had even suggested as coal secretary, because coal was also getting impacted because of that. I had suggested, why can't states like Gujarat and Rajasthan be clubbed in the sense of bureaucracies of two states sitting together in a room, coming out a workable action plan on the lines of what happened in Gujarat. Chhattisgarh is doing very well. I suggested, why can't Chhattisgarh and MP sit together? Old state. They could sit together and find out what is happening in Chhattisgarh. So it's not from Timbuktu or West that we are looking at. We had successful models in the country. I think the intensity was missing. I think most of it was happening in Delhi, unlike it should have happened in the states. I say that because in coal, in 2 years as coal secretary, I didn't convene a single meeting of the state governments in Delhi. We traveled to the states, sat with the state government, sat with the officials there, worked out a detailed action plan in conjunction with their understanding of what we were doing, and it worked. It does work, because you have to sit with the state governments, not in Delhi. See, in Delhi, even secretary will never have time to spend the entire day. If I go to a state, I have nothing else to do but for sitting with the state government officials and working out a plan. I'm not very sure this happened in the Uday scheme. Uday was a fantastic idea. Uday, so to say, had worked in Gujarat.